Grab your cocktail and get ready for this episode of the Old Fashion Masonic Podcast.
Welcome to the Old Fashion Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things Freemasons while drinking an old fashioned. Obviously, I swallow a frog and sound like I'm going through puberty again, like Peter Brady. So this is, I think this is episode 5 of the Debatable series. And I'm Brian.
I'm happy to be here.
I'm Dave.
Alex Rosell, as you know, that's his line. So beforehand, we flipped a coin. Alex is going to be the pro. Dave's going to be the con. I will not be the moderator. It's going to be Most Worshipful Bob, but I am going to open up to give these guys some time off camera to talk about the topics. The topic for this episode is Affinity Lodges Must Go. Yeah, think that through, boys. So for those who don't know what an affinity lodge is, I don't know if all jurisdictions have those, but in Kansas, for example, we have several. The first one that I can remember starting, I think, was a Justice Lodge, and it was a lodge just for law enforcement based, whether it be police, sheriff, district attorneys, judges, so anything law enforcement. But there's also some for just motorcycles. There's some in some other jurisdictions that is just plumbers, it's just welders. So the topic is Affinity Lodges Must Go. So hold tight for us, and we'll get Most Worshipful Bob in to be the moderator, and stay with us and tell us what you think.
5 minutes later.
And we're back. If you recall, the topic is Affinity Lodges Must Go. Remember, we're pro over here, pro on they must go, and con. So Alex and Dave, kick us off there.
Fantastic. Well, I think this is a great topic. The idea of affinity lodges, I think, is great. The idea behind it. I love the idea of Masons with similar interests getting together and doing something fraternal. That's great. Where the line is you can't call that a lodge for a couple of reasons. What is the purpose of a lodge? The purpose of a lodge is to make Masons. Affinity lodges aren't making Masons, number one. Number two, Most Worshipful, would you remind me, what are the requirements for somebody to be a Mason? To be a man, freeborn, of lawful age, well recommended?
Resident and age restrictions, right. Mostly in a belief in a beneficent supreme being.
Anything else?
Those are the core.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else other than that would preclude you from joining a lodge or anything like that?
Sure. There's some expectations. Again, I'll be a little careful on wording, right? But there are some gender specifics in most jurisdictions. There's being of sound mind and old man in dotage, a few things like that.
Sure.
So there are some other absolute expectations.
Sure. So if Dave and I are both big Jayhawks. If we were to say, to be a Mason, you have to be a Jayhawk fan. Is that allowed?
No. You're pulling on the moderator a lot for your point. But no, go right ahead.
I apologize.
Yeah.
The point that I'm trying to make is that affinity lodges, one, I take issue with them being called lodges. Lodges exist to make Masons, period. Two, if you're a lodge and you're creating additional barriers to joining that lodge, being said affinity, whether it's Justice Lodge, you have to be in law enforcement to join this lodge. That is a barrier that I think that goes against what Masonry is. So I think that in concept, I'm okay with the idea of affinity lodges. I'm not okay with them being called lodges and being able to have a charter and open and closed lodge. Now, I understand that is the rule of the land, and I will go along with the Grand Master here in Kansas. That is the decision, and I accept that. However, these are my beliefs. These are my kind of foundational reasons for why affinity lodges must go. I would love for them to change the name to affinity clubs. without the idea or without the ability to open and close lodge. Get together, ride your motorcycles together, get together, talk about law enforcement, and get together, do what you like to do with guys that like to do the same thing. Not a lodge. And I'll stop with that.
Very good. Your case.
Yeah, thank you. Great points. Seriously, good points. So, I think that maybe we're getting into the point of semantics here with the name of the lodge, because literally before you said it, I wrote down, well, should we just change them to clubs? And so we're on the same wavelength there as far as the moniker we give it or the title that we give it. I would agree that a Masonic lodge is one that makes Masons. It takes good men and makes them better. And a Masonic lodge is one that is filled with the diversity of thought, the diversity of philosophy and ideology that I think makes the fraternity so attractive. So I would concede your point that the name is contentious, but I'll say this. I'm part of what Brian and I would call an affinity lodge in Texas. And I am not part of the Grand Lodge in Texas. But it is something that I have interest in. It's the Tranquility Lodge number 2000. It's Lodge on the Moon. They do not have, a regular lodge where they actually meet, because most people can't afford that trip, right? But it's a supreme interest of mine, and I think it's a great idea because I don't even have to go to Texas. I don't have to be part of Texas to be part of that fun, right? I do the serious side of Masonry, and it's nice to have that outlet that I can enjoy with other brothers, right? With people that I know have gone through the same thing. And so as far as the name, yeah, I'd be with you. Let's change it to a club. But I really like the idea of the affinity lodges. And by the way, in Texas, they don't call it an affinity lodge. I don't know what they actually call it, to be perfectly honest, but that's kind of what Brian and I decided. It's the same thing as what we have. It's affinity lodges. So we can change the name. I don't think that changes the substance of it. But I feel like an affinity lodge or an affinity club is something that could keep Masons interested, right? And so they still have their Blue Lodge duties, they still have their obligation there, but now they've got something else within Masonry and with other brothers that keeps them engaged, keeps them active in Masonry. And I think there's no better reason to have something within Masonry than to keep people interested.
True.
So that is, let me check my notes real quick, make sure that's all I had. I wrote club in here too, so we're definitely on the same wavelength. That's actually all of my argument, but I would agree with you on the surface, and I am curious though. In the law enforcement affinity lodge that we have, is it required that you are in law enforcement or that you have an interest in it? Do we know?
I'm not sure. I think you might know better than me, but I think that it's reserved, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that it's reserved for people that are career law enforcement or have had a career in law enforcement.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% sure.
I think that's fair. My information may be a little dated as well, guys, but it was current LEO, former LEO, and also prosecuting attorney, not defendant.
And dispatchers as well,
yeah.
So anybody actually involved?
Including prosecuting attorneys as well. So it says law enforcement, right? But it's a little bit broad.
But you do have to have a tacit involvement and not just an interest in the subject.
Yes.
Would you? Okay.
Yeah. Either past or present. You can be retired. Absolutely.
Okay. I guess I wasn't done. The barriers to entry that you mentioned, I would agree that in an actual lodge, in a Masonic lodge, we want no barriers to entry other than what is universal.
Sure.
But as far as a barrier to entry for an affinity club, an affinity lodge, whatever we want to label it as. I think the barriers to entry are fine, so long as everybody has agreed to, and that is what their core is actually. So.
I think what's interesting about this conversation is that we're both saying the same things here. We're both saying that all of the reasons that you mentioned so well are ways that our craft is growing and is sparking new interest and is giving guys reasons, outside of going to Blue Lodge meetings to get together. That's what our fraternity is about. To get together and share ideas, and bounce things off of each other and do fun things.
And I'm switching chairs on me here.
I am not.
You're softening up a little bit. But I go on or they're not.
I am not.
Yeah, okay.
Affinity lodges need to be good. The way that they are labeled now, I take issue with the fact that they have the ability to open and close lodge. I take issue with the fact that they do that, but they're not making Masons. I have zero issue, however, with creating organizations where law enforcement can get together and talk about those things and be amongst brothers to talk about that. I think that's amazing, but it's not a lodge. It can't be a lodge. A lodge has to abide by specific rules and have specific goals. Can't provide, barriers to entry outside of what's been already established. But, that doesn't mean that I'm against, these groups getting together and sharing the love for riding motorcycles or law enforcement or plumbers getting together and talking about plumbing. I think that's fantastic. We need more of it. But again, kind of going back to the core, I take issue with them being called lodges.
Yeah, I may have lost a little control here, right? So did you feel you got to state your initial case? I think we did.
Yes.
Did you get to have your initial case? And I think there's a little bit of back and forth or rebuttal, which I'm great with. We're good there. So any last thoughts on that?
I think I'm good. I think very well said. Thank you.
Likewise.
Okay. We'll be right back with my determination. Okay, here we are with my response or decision on that, right? And just remind you, affinity lodges must go. So, great points. I think great points of discussion. You both argued your points well for it. So here I am with that. First of all, both presented well. We kind of melded the middle a little bit on opinions that there's some value, but should it be called a lodge is where this seems to come down to. So my experience and my opinion on this, right? If you're going to get together, act as Masons, I want to be in a lodge with brothers I know are acting on the same. In my jurisdiction, it needs to be in a tiled setting of a lodge. Now, if that's the case, then they are a lodge. What is the definition of a lodge? What is the main purpose of a lodge? To make Masons. 100% agree with you, right? Let's think back in history. Military lodges at the founding of our country, right? In some cases, depending on the jurisdiction, they couldn't even form. Some jurisdictions were afraid it was going to lessen or sully the grand jurisdiction of the state, so they wouldn't allow it. Others would. Some would allow it, but they couldn't make Masons, right? So I think depending on your jurisdiction, how they define affinity lodge, I think affinity lodges do allow brothers of like mind to come together, aka the old military lodges when they met together. It allows them to enjoy that experience with a shared group of brothers and the same either avenue of work or whatever their hobby is for that. I also am a dual member for other jurisdictions. My dad was a Mason in South Carolina. They allow me to join without me having to be made a Mason. I was not made a Mason in South Carolina. I was able to become a member of that lodge and become affiliated with South Carolina. Due to the history, due to how jurisdictions may define it, I think affinity lodges do add value. If I'm going to be with a group of brothers, I want to know that they are Masons, and I want it to be in a tiled session. Someone is going to be controlling that underneath certain guidelines of the jurisdiction they're in. To me, the affinity lodges do add value. They make sense. In my opinion, they can be called a lodge, whether they do or don't make Masons. In the state of Kansas, I think that has evolved. I believe affinity lodges are making Masons, interdependents, telegraphs, master Masons. But even if not, South Carolina saw me fit that I've been vetted through another lodge and a recognized jurisdiction to allow me to join. I think that can still be done with an affinity lodge, even if they aren't making Masons. So I would say affinity lodges add value, and they should not go. They should stay. They add value. Brothers, well done. Appreciate your point of view. Great discussion topic.
Cheers.
We hope you're taking it back to your lodge and discussing that as well.